Dylan Horton. I live in Davis, and so I knew him in the time that I lived there through Desiree. It was, really sort of impactful on me that he took time to mentor me and support me. He didn't really know me from anybody, but he saw a little bit of value in, sort of paying it forward that way, and I really am appreciative for the small, part that he devoted of his life to just helping me as an individual, but also, just the towering legacy that he has in civil rights and labor rights and fighting for immigrants. He was given a sort of a Lifetime Achievement Award by the city of Davis just a couple of years ago for his work. So there's, a lot of us have been locked at home for, more than a year, trying to do our best to be responsible. And I haven't been at a lot of public events. I felt like I had to do justice to him and be present here today to pay tribute to his life and legacy.
Rick Revelis. Helen is my sister, Albert's wife. And we've been with him, when he started doing all of this, but he's been a wonderful man. He would stand up for people's rights and that, and he was just a wonderful man. We went picketing with him a lot, and he's been like an older brother. He's been in the family, and we loved him forever. I believe 6-7 years old when I met him, when they got married. So we've been enjoying his time and his life with us since then. But he's a good person.
My name is Brother Carter. I'm with the Poor People's Campaign, National Call for Moral Revival. I met Al back in 2012, 2013. He was coming out to a lot of our work through the Occupy movement as we developed the Poor People's Campaign, which is called Occupy the Dream. And he was always a person that came to our actions and events and talked about the history of his work with Cesar Chavez and then the farm workers. And it was very important that we took in his conversation about those areas, because those were around the areas when Dr. King was actually doing his work with Cesar Chavez, and bringing things to around the area of social justice. But the thing about Al was every day. It wasn't the moment. He was every day on the front line, and we called him Love on the Front Line, because that was Al. And when we had the speakers to come up, most speakers would get maybe 2 or 3 minutes, but when Al came and it was his time to speak, we gave him as much time as he wanted, because of the simple fact of the history and everything that he shared. It was like it was a non-ending struggle, and he was connecting and keeping that struggle going to make sure that we were all educated, because I'm a 60s child, I was born in the 60s, so remembering the work of Cesar Chavez and Dr. King, and in that method we decided, like I said, to put together the Poor People's Campaign, and we called it the reconnection of that movement to make sure that everything that was happening during that time had an intersection to it. So Al was a great big part of that intersection. So everything that was happening in the past and that was happening during our time, he was intersecting and connecting. So that helped our movement to grow, that helped everybody to come together and understand and get a substance of not just knowing of the movements, but becoming an activist yourself, becoming and being an advocate, for all of these issues. Like the last thing that Al was working on was the Driscoll project, and being a part of that and getting people to understand. It started off small, but Al broadened the horizons of it and brought people into understanding. You're not just marching out here on the streets, but going to the grocery stores, going to the different places, and like I said, and informing people and letting people know. Al was a true humanitarian when it came to not just his people, but for all people. He fought the good fight. I tell people every day, he was a very passionate person. He's a very person that gave you his all. And that was the most important. As an advocate, I do the same thing today myself. I'm learning from him. And he was one of my greatest teachers, you know what I'm saying? So yesterday I was part of his funeral going away. Yes, the wake and doing that, you know what I'm saying, and talking with the family and making sure that the family, you know, understood that, you know, their father, grandfather, you know what I'm saying, uncle, or whatever, and all of these things, great-grandfather was a great man, and he was a righteous man. He did great work here on earth, and it was his time, you know what I'm saying, to go home and rest, because God was saying, it's your time, a job well done, it's time to rest. But as far as his legacy and the work that he's done will live on for generations and generations, because that's what it's about, you know, that we seek from the elders, that information that we carry on as a substance, you know what I'm saying, of hope, you know what I'm saying, and the will to continue to take it where we need to take it, and that's to reach the forms and the plights of justice.
Al was a giant among giants. He did exactly what we are all commanded to do, and some of us didn't. But Al certainly was there in front of the lucha from day one. He dedicated his whole life to fair justice, not just for the Mexicanos here, but Mexicanos throughout the continent here. He will be missed. We need to pick up where he left off and not let his legend die. I really saw him. I had seen him before at one of a relative there in Tulare, but at some kind of a party. But then I really met him in Missouri. He was touring, I think, Missouri, Iowa, Kansas, making speeches through different places. And he spent time in my house with me and for a while there while he was doing that program. And then I knew of him, and I too, you know, that we have farms back there too, you know. I've worked in the fields just like they did, you know, stoop labor, sun to sun, and it wasn't fun, but giants like him make corrections, not just here, but throughout the country, and in Mexico, and I'm sure in Canada also now.
Kathleen Williams, a good friend of Al Rojas in the movement. Al Rojas taught us so much. He led us to unite the international struggles of farm workers and the broader community of workers. He taught us so much. He used to say, don't call us immigrants, call us migrant and indigenous people. His example and his leadership continues.
My name is Jerry Ann Guzman. I am with AIM Foothill Central and MMIWMP of California. And my first memory of Al was when I was about 12 years old. I got to meet him. Him and Cesar Chavez came to Vallejo during the farm workers' grape boycott. And about 3 years ago, I got to meet him again here in Sacramento when Desiree was doing the International Women's March. The man is the backbone of everything that has to do with the farm workers, with unionizing, with helping people. He was a people's person, and he was somebody that was extremely important in the movement, and he will be greatly missed. A piece of us went with him.
My name's Thoma. I'm here for MIWWP, and for the memorial service, and out of respect. That's all.
This is what Al helped start. Al and Larry were actually really good friends. They were the only two that really spoke really against what Chavez was trying to force everybody else to do, because they were very different organizers than Chavez was, and like I said, they were very good friends, but they were the beginning. They were the beginning of all that happened during that time, prior to the UFW. Al actually was a member of UFW. My father was the strike director for AWOC, Agricultural Worker Organization Committee, and it was the unification of all these leaders, and my father asking Chavez to join the strike, where most people are led to believe that Chavez started it all. He didn't. He actually was asked to join, and ultimately my father gave him an ultimatum. He said to him, "Look, if you don't join our strike, we'll break your strike. We have to do this together." And then finally Chavez gave in, and Al was there the day that they took the vote at the Guadalupe Church in Delano, and he was speaking, and Gil Perdilla was speaking, and apparently from what Al was telling me that Chavez didn't want to speak. He sat the whole time, and eventually finally spoke, and they put the vote, and it was the union members that voted to join the Filipinos, join AWOC in the strike, and it's just the history is a little bit made to fit the UFW, their way of thinking and such, but it was people like Al who helped get the history out. Al, he stood behind me and said, that everything that I was saying about my father was true and correct, and and Al, he gave his life to helping others and speaking up for those who couldn't speak, who were strong enough to stand in front, like my father, and they both were very good friends. They knew how it was and what each of them went to. And when Al was got frustrated with what was going on, my dad went to his house and talked to him. And shortly after Al left, my father left. It wasn't too long after that. So they were both basically forced out of the union, and by Chavez, and and me growing up as an adult and having a person like Al around, as a kid growing up, he was my tío, we called him tío, and standing up for my father and speaking for him when he passed away, in 1977, and to go out there and fight against what the union, the UFW, was saying, to bring out the truth. And, Al supported me the whole time. And, he's the Rojas family is part of the Itliong family. And it's just all our elders, these all great examples of leaders, and they're all leaving us, and it's up to us to learn the history and to really understand what's going on, and not be so quick to have our feelings hurt. And you see what these guys went through, these real men went through, the struggles and the starvation of the family and friends, and the the racism of back then and what was going on. It took men like Al to stand up and to fight, and that's what I'll continue to do, and I'll try to instill that into my children, because these were hard men, these were working men, and just a good example of good people. It's my honor to be here, be among the family, to be treated like family here.
To me, Al Rojas was a giant, and literally every conversation I ever had with him, it was like speaking with a history book, you know, and I just loved him dearly. And I'm so grateful for everything that he taught me over the few years that I got to know him. And he will be missed.
What's your name?
My name is Scott.
Yeah, Al was a good friend, and we live in San Francisco. He would come into San Francisco and stay with us. You know, he was constantly working to change the world, to make it better. That he would come to San Francisco to get kind of a rest at our house. It was kind of peaceful. We often saw Albert upstairs in our house, walking, talking to people in different languages. He wasn't really resting. He never seemed to really rest. He was a constant force and really a beautiful friend and a beautiful man who spent his life doing useful things for the planet and for people all around him. He's really an amazing person.
I'm Julie Trachtenberg, and I met Albert and Elena and the three kids at the time in 1968 in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and we've been very connected to the family. We worked with them on the grape boycott, and then we all ended up in California in 1970 and continued on from there with the lettuce boycott and have remained part of their family. As a continuum, they're very deeply involved with, we're all very deeply involved with each other. Just very much loved family for all of us. So,
my name is Josh Kaizuka. I am the co-president of the Florence chapter of the Japanese American Citizens League. I actually met Al about 15 or 16 years ago at a protest. It was a protest in West Sacramento to fight for the residents in West Sacramento who were being stereotyped as gang members. And that was a pretty long campaign, but I gotta say, from that particular action, which was my first protest, as an attorney, you know, you don't actually get involved, right? You don't get to the protest because you might get arrested. But I think Al put into me that, you know, ground organizations, or organizations that are on the front lines and on the ground, are important. And to this day, now that I actually do go out to rallies, organize protests, I take a lot from what I learned from Al, his daughter Desiree. The last time I met Al, or saw Al, was at a protest, right before the COVID shutdown. And he is such a hero. It's been an honor for me to have known him, and an inspiration to make sure that I follow in his footsteps of fighting for the underdog. So I do that in my career as an attorney, and also with the various organizations to fight against discrimination against migrants, immigrants, Muslim bans, and currently the anti-Asian hate rhetoric.
Yeah, I mean, this xenophobia, this attack on Asians, it's a terrible thing. I mean, and Al was really, but for people of color, for Asians, I mean, just to be targeted, I mean, it's really...
Yeah, well, you got to look back at the colonialism that started in this country. I mean, that's the foundation of this country. The white supremacy, basically taking things from people who had the right to own, the right to stay, the right to be. And I think that's still going on today. I mean, if you think about the xenophobia, the discrimination and hate towards minorities, including Asians, you know, those things started with the foundation of this country. The hate against Asians started 150 years ago as, you know, the Chinese immigrants came in, then the Japanese immigrants came in, and every other Asian immigrant came in. So this is like 150 years old. We had the Chinese massacre in LA in 1851. You know, kids being lynched in LA, right? Today I'm here to celebrate Al's life, but also to make sure that I keep on fighting in the manner that he did.
He was a humanist. He believed in all people.
Yeah, I mean, the working class, the people who actually do stuff and make a difference to make society work, right? And yeah, he focused a lot of his energy on farm workers, but it went beyond that, because any group that was targeted and discriminated against, he would be there for them. I mean, his last campaigns were kids in cages, right? That's where I saw him before this pandemic, out in front of the ICE office. I saw him out on the streets at campaigns in Sacramento to fight for migrant children who's been separated from their families. So I'm going to keep continuing to do that kind of stuff.
I'm Alan Benjamin. I'm a delegate to the San Francisco Labor Council, and I've worked with Al most recently and on many battlefields and fronts, but most recently in the binational campaign against free trade, the wall of shame, and deportations. Al was a giant in our eyes, and a fighter, and he didn't balk at raising unpopular views among some, whether it was the trade union officialdom or the political establishment. On NAFTA and the new agreement, he was very clear. It's a corporate agreement. It's not reformable. When people were telling him it can be improved, he said, that's just a hoax. It's just a way to have us swallow the bitter pill. And he was consistent. He said, we're going to speak truth to power. We're going to not allow ourselves to be co-opted and taken down paths which aren't the rank and file, which aren't the grassroots, which aren't the independent struggle of the workers and of all oppressed peoples. And I think that's really the legacy and the meaning that we should draw from his life, is that we have to be unconditionally on the side of workers and not allow ourselves to be hoodwinked by the politicians in the service of the bosses, and that's what I take. He was a wonderful, wonderful, wonderful fighter, militant, a family. He loved his family dearly. He loved Mexico dearly, and he was uncompromising. He was uncompromising in his commitment and in his love for working people, especially, as he called them, los de abajo, the downtrodden, the ones from below.
And the idea of borders, for indigenous people.
He said the border crossed us. We're the original indigenous people. Here they are. It's artificial borders that separate people, and we can't accept them. The right not to migrate is rooted in the fact that the U.S. policy, which drew the border, which dispossessed Mexico of most of its lands, it's not our border. And U.S. policy has destroyed the economy and the people of Mexico, forcing indigenous people to leave their communities for the northern border of Mexico, or to try to cross to have a better life, because their economy, indigenous communities, have been destroyed. NAFTA's destroyed them. NAFTA, CAFTA, the new USMCA, although they try to pretend to prettify it and say that it's really better, Al said bullshit. He said there's no mechanisms of implementation. It's just trying to pretty an agreement that is essentially anti-worker, on either side of the border. And that was his great commitment, and that was his great contribution, that we have to continue that struggle.
And what is the role of Al in Mexico? He's revered, you say, on both sides of the border. What impact did he have in Mexico? And why have the Mexican labor movement and working people recognized Al at this point? What was his role?
Well, Al early on was a big supporter of trade union independence against the corporatist, government-run, government-sponsored CTM, the major trade union federation. And so he always stood by the one independent union, which in the 1950s arose, which was the Electrical Workers Union, and was at their side, was at the side of all the attempts of the farm workers to create their own unions, of oil workers to create their own unions. And these unions, mine workers, these unionists who attempted to organize independent unions were killed. The goons, this is not the U.S. where, you're shunned and denounced and whatever. These people were killed, and Al was constantly in their face. He was constantly traveling to Mexico, holding press conferences and saying, we stand against the Latina leadership in the oil workers union, who's going along and accepting the privatization, gradual privatization of the oil industry. And these workers have stood up, we're at their side, and he was constantly in their face, and he did get a lot of press. La Jornada, which is one of the Mexican sort of center-left daily newspapers, ran a full page of the open letter that the Rojas family sent to the Mexican president. They ran that in recognition of the work that he's done for Mexico. So he is revered by the ranks. And even the officials of the semi-independent union federations have to acknowledge. Even López Obrador, the president.
So my name is Sewing Ban, and I've known Al for quite some time now. And how I met Al is that he would organize a lot of the marches for immigrant rights. I initially helped him with some of the securities and just fell in love with the man, and just has been by his side, going to events with him. I can share a little bit more when I speak later on at the program, but I just want to be here to honor Al, and this is such a beautiful site. This is exactly how he would have wanted it. Al he really belongs in the history book. He has fought for his people his whole life, and I'm just glad that I'm able to be here to witness the honoring of his passing in this ceremony.
This is the guy that's organized. I know.
Llegué